So if you're anywhere near as much of an iPad fan as I am, you've been waiting for this event for 18 months, and it did not disappoint. So while this is fresh, I wanted to go over what happened over the keynote and give my reactions to all the cool stuff we saw. So the first bit of iPad news we got was a price reduction for the iPad 10, which was weirdly, I think over $400 before, but has now come down to $350, which feels a lot more like where it should have been from the beginning. That means that the 9th generation iPad, which was previously $329, is no longer in the lineup. So that means there's no more iPads with Lightning, and there's no more iPads that have a headphone jack. That $350 price point is important because this is, I would imagine, the most popular iPad. So it's nice that people can get into more modern iPad features, like the all-screen design and USB-C, for a cheaper price. That's really great. So the new iPad Air gets a few significant updates. First of all, it gets upgraded from the M1 to the M2 chip. Now the M2 naturally comes with faster CPUs, but it also brings Wi-Fi 6E support as well. The M2 also brings support for Apple Pencil Hover, which quite frankly, I'm still not sure why that is tied to a specific chip, but there you go. You get that feature now if you want an iPad Air. The new Air also gets a landscape front-facing camera, just like the iPad 10 before it. So if you're using your iPad in a keyboard dock, you're no longer going to be looking off to the side, which is super great. Long overdue. Wish they would have did this a couple years ago, but it's going to be here now, and that's great. The camera hardware itself seems to be unchanged from what I can see, and that's fine. The cameras on iPads are good enough, and that is enough. But of course, what is probably the biggest difference with the M2 generation is we get an additional size. There's now a 13-inch iPad Air in addition to the 11-inch model. This means that you no longer have to spend over $1,000 to get into the larger size iPad, which is great. If you're using your iPad for productivity, for me, it's really hard to beat that larger size of the 13-inch model. Things like Final Cut and Logic really need that extra room to breathe. So it's great that comes down to a cheaper price point. The 11-inch iPad Air keeps its same price, starting at $599, with an increased base storage to 128, and the 13-inch iPad Air comes in at $799, which, you know, all things considered, isn't the worst starting price in the world. I thought it'd be a little closer to 1,000 personally, so this is actually kind of nice. And again, while I'm not planning on getting an iPad Air, for those who find that is enough tablet for them, the upgraded M2 iPad Air seems like a really, really good option and a great upgrade. The iPad Air comes in 4 finishes: space gray, blue, purple, and starlight. So the first thing I want to say about the new iPad Pros is this update hits what is the Apple sweet spot for me. And that means it came in thinner, lighter, and faster. And that's, to me, something Apple does better than almost anyone else in the industry. So just starting with that, this upgrade becomes worth it for me. Taking a look at social media, it doesn't seem other people appreciate that the iPad Pros are thinner as much as I do, but hey, we all want different things, that's all right. I'm looking forward especially to the weight reduction on the 13-inch model, because even though at 1.5 pounds it's not heavy, but for a device you're using while it's in your hands, it's on the hefty side. So really looking forward to taking advantage of that. The new iPad Pros come with the M4, not the M3 chip. The M4 has a host of advantages, some of them the same ones you'd expect, right? Every SoC is faster, right? So it's going to be a little bit faster. It also brings the GPU improvements that we saw in the A17 Pro in the iPhone 15 and the M3 generation of Mac chips. Those improvements are coming to iPad. So that means ray tracing support and games, if developers can be bothered to actually put that in their iPad games. That would be great. The biggest benefit of putting M4 in the iPad Pro isn't AI, which of course it does that, right? Apple's chips have had neural engines for years, so they've always done AI stuff, but it's really the efficiency. The increased efficiency over the M2 is what allows Apple to make these devices so much thinner without making them slower or have reduced battery life. The new iPad Pros get a major display upgrade, and this time the 11-inch model comes along for the ride. Both models get what Apple is calling an Ultra Retina XDR display. It's a tandem OLED display that they designed that addresses one of the weaknesses of OLED, which has traditionally been its brightness level. So the OLED displays on these iPads are able to still hit the same brightness levels as the mini LED of the previous 12.9-inch model, We also retain the same standard features such as ProMotion and True Tone that you would expect on an iPad Pro display. There's even an option for a nano texture coating, but only on the 1TB and 2TB models, which is weird. That doesn't really make any sense. The Pros also get the relocated front-facing camera, as you would expect, and they remain the only iPads with Face ID. The main reason I'm excited for this change is because I am using my 13-inch iPad more in landscape, and your hand covers the Face ID sensor and the ambient light sensor, so the screen is constantly dimming as I'm holding it, and it's really obnoxious. So assuming that's all been relocated, that's going to be great. The new iPad Pro comes in 2 colors, silver and space black, which my understanding is similar to the MacBook Pro, is kind of a dark gray. There were no changes announced for the speaker system. It still has 4 speakers, but I'm wondering if Apple has found that they've kind of hit the limit of what they can do in a tablet enclosure like this. Hopefully the speakers don't get any worse. I don't think any of the reviewers are going to be able to say anything until next week when the embargo lifts. Interestingly, iPad Pro loses a few features as well. The previous iPad Pros actually had, in addition to the main camera, an ultra-wide camera, and that is now just gone. As you know, I just did a whole video about iPad cameras. I'm not one of those people who shames others for using their iPad as a camera. You do you. That being said, I don't think I've ever used the ultra-wide camera on my current iPad, so I'm not sad that it's gone. Secondly, the cellular iPad Pro loses millimeter wave 5G support, which is apparently only in the US. It's like a US thing and isn't very well supported, and the rest of the world really doesn't care about it. So that's another one where I'm not super sad to see it go. I mean, there's Wi-Fi in most places I go, so it's fine. So as expected, we have a new Magic Keyboard case. Based on what I've seen, it looks a lot like the last one, but it has some significant changes. I think the one that'll make people the most happy is the addition of a function row, which means that you no longer have to, if you want to change volume, reach up to the buttons or go over the control center. You can just tap one of the function keys and continue on with what you're doing. So that's a nice addition. Supposedly it has aluminum palm rests, and there's more aluminum in the construction overall. The material looks the same from what I can see though, so I'm not sure how those two things jive. What would be great though, if there is aluminum in the construction, if it made the base just a little bit heavier on your lap. I find sometimes when I'm working on something with the Magic Keyboard case, the iPad has a tendency to want to fall forward because of the tablet being heavier than the hinge piece. So maybe it helps with that. I'm not sure. It doesn't look like any different angles supported, just the same set of angles we've had with the original Magic Keyboard accessory. And it does not look like they've upgraded the USB port, so it still only supports pass-through charging and not data as well, which I was really hoping for, 'cause then you'd have 2 modern USB ports that you could use for whatever you wanted. Oh, almost forgot. The trackpad is also supposedly bigger. Probably not MacBook big, but any increase we can get there is much needed because, especially on the 11-inch model, that trackpad gets kind of small. The pricing of the Magic Keyboard looks to be the same as the previous model, which is $299 for the 11-inch model and $349 for the 13-inch model. Of course, that pricing varies depending on what region you're in. So still a very useful but very expensive accessory that is, of course, completely optional. And then there's the Apple Pencil Pro, which, of course, it's Pro, right? I'm kind of surprised now we don't have a Magic Keyboard Pro. No real surprises here if you've been following the rumors. The Apple Pencil Pro supports 3 new features. First is a squeeze gesture, which is something developers can take advantage of to display like a palette of tools or something. A gesture they're calling a barrel roll, which is where you kind of twist the pencil and something can happen. Probably more artist-oriented because I don't really see a practical use for that. And there's also haptic feedback, which, a bit unexpected, it's used to confirm that one of your gestures was successful. So like if you're double tapping or squeezing the pencil, you'll get a haptic feedback to confirm that that action was received. I thought they'd do something a little bit more like Microsoft does with their Surface Slim Pen, where I believe they use haptic feedback to simulate the resistance of pen on paper, but I guess this works too. Seems like a pretty decent update, and it comes in at the same price at $129 of the previous model. Unfortunately, no black though. That would have been cool, but Apple could release a space black Apple Pencil whenever they wanted, right? So maybe we'll see that in the future. So Apple's Pro apps for iPad, Final Cut, and Logic are getting some big updates this spring to coincide with the new iPads. Final Cut gets a cool feature called Live Multicam, which actually will work in tandem with a new iPhone app called Final Cut Camera. It lets you run a live multicam session using those iPhones from your iPad. People who produce actual video content seem to be pretty excited about this, if for no other reason than that Final Cut Camera app is a standalone camera app you can just use on your iPhone by itself. The feature that Final Cut gets that I'm most looking forward to is, of course, external drive support, which means you should be able to edit directly from an external drive just like you can on the Mac. In Logic, it looks like Apple is increasing the AI capabilities of some of the virtual instruments like the drummer or the bass instrument, and they're also adding a stem splitter feature. It sounds like it uses AI to extract various pieces from a track in Logic. I'm picking up the 13-inch Pro in silver, and I'm picking up the 11-inch Pro with the nano texture in space black. The nano texture, for whatever reason, isn't shipping until June. My 13-inch should be arriving next week, and so expect to see a lot more content both here and on the website, slatepad.org, around the new iPad Pro. And with that, thank you for tuning in. Again, check out the website, slatepad.org, where I'll be writing more about the new iPads and what they mean in the larger Apple ecosystem in the coming days. If you could like and subscribe on your way out, that would really be appreciated. It would help the channel out a ton. And I will catch you in the next one.